Hello and welcome to Andertons TV. My name is Jack Duxbury. He's Tay-Tay.
Yo.
And we've got a special setup, and sat in this special setup are...
Elliott.
And Sean.
From...
Cranborne Audio.
In sync. Hey, we're not going to do any weird intros or, clickbaity type of stuff. This video is going to be me asking you guys questions about the inception of Cranborne Audio and maybe a little bit about the products. Basically, I've found you online, fell in love, a bit like, Tinder, and this is our first day.
You swiped right.
I swiped so right, man. I super liked.
Oh, wow.
If anyone's been on there, you'll know what I'm saying. Let's talk about where it started. How I've seen a lot about the products, but who is Cranborne Audio? Where is it, and why?
It's a good question. So, Cranborne, first of all, the name is kind of the key. So, me, Elliott, Ed Holmes, who is our genius, our electronics guru, and Andy Pat, who's our industrial design creative guru. We all met at the Cranborne house in the Cranborne industrial estate on Cranborne Road in Potter's Bar, where we worked together at Soundcraft. So we were kind of the next generation. We're all a bit younger than the old guard at Soundcraft were. We were kind of the new ringers, as they were, the young guys. And we kind of worked together as a team, us four and a couple of the other guys, and we loved working together. Well, I don't want to speak for you, Elliott.
Yeah. And it's ups and downs.
But we loved working together. We had a great vibe. It's classic, better than some of the parts. We all had our areas. We all had our different areas of expertise and our way of viewing things and our perspective. And when we worked together, you got something fantastic. And we designed a few award-winning products together for Soundcraft. And then me and Ed went on to other brands and did some other products as well. But what we loved about our vibe and when working together was we were honest with each other, we worked well together, and we did it for the right reasons. We cared about what we did. We wanted to do the right thing. We didn't want to just make another box, Me Too, clone, whatever. We wanted to innovate. We had, especially Elliott and I, were very opinionated about audio gear, guitars, everything. And we just think we can, with our expertise and with our approach, we can do something special, but we had to be freed from the claws of some of the downsides of being at a large audio company. So we wanted to do our own thing, rewrite the rule book, do it for each other, do it for ourselves, and make something special for people.
Did you break free first, or did you have the idea for a product first that they wouldn't allow you to make? Was it product driven, or did you kind of go to a new place and went, right, with a blank slate, what are we going to make together?
I think we'll probably have different answers. You first, Els.
Yeah, well, it was slightly forced, the breaking free. A lot of things changed where we were before. Some decisions were made, and then I found myself needing a job, things like that. But we went away and did our own things for a while. And then it was only when we started talking about a year later when we thought, do you know what? We had those great ideas back then. They weren't suitable for a brand like that. Things like this are a very, very different style of thing. We kind of called each other up and said, actually, wouldn't it be great if we actually made those things a reality? We thought, we'd never make this work. It's far too complicated to start up a company and compete with these big guys. But we were mad enough to give it a go. And then here we are.
And you said things. What was the first thing?
Well, the first thing was preamps.
So the preamp came first?
Absolutely.
Basically, Ed's, it's a shame he's not here. He's too busy working hard.
Hey, Ed.
Thanks, Ed. Cheers, bud. Ed is, I don't know how to say it. His IQ is off the charts. He's just he's a crazy guy, and he's awesome. And he'll kick your butt too, because he's a black belt in karate. He's awesome. He's just
just one of
those guys who's just whatever he puts his mind to.
That's who I want to make my preamps.
Precisely. Well said, Jack. Exactly. So basically, when Ed was at Soundcraft working with us, we were working on so many different types of preamps. We were working on the Ghost preamps for the Soundcraft Signature Series. We were working on the VI series, really big live sound consoles, the really high-end preamps in there. We were looking at Studer preamps. We were looking at entry-level mixer preamps. We were looking at so many different types of preamps. And Graham Blythe, who's the co-founder of Soundcraft, he was their analog guy. He was ill a lot when we were there. So Ed, it was kind of thrusted upon him. And he just kind of learned everything there is about analog electronics, as you do. So anyway, we got a lot of ideas. And I come from the big studio background. Elliott comes from a more guitar, performance, project studio, home recording background. And you combine our experience and then you brief Ed properly, there's nothing he can't make because he's just, one of those kind of guys. So Ed had ideas. He's like, this is when we were still at Soundcraft. He's like, I have a lot of ideas about preamp topologies. And I'm like, okay, well, we don't have, we're not allowed to work on this, so keep your thoughts to yourself. But then, as Elliott alluded to, when we went out on our own, it's like, so Ed, about those preamps you were thinking about, walk me through it. Let me see. And then, obviously, I'm a big fan of clean preamps. Whenever I worked at big studios in New York, in the New York area, and I tended to go towards our clean preamps a lot because I found I got better raw captures. Like if I got a lot of vibey, transformery, tubey preamps, they all have a sound, and then when you're summing 32 channels and 48 channels, that sound could be good, it could not be. Whereas when everything's clean, you have a blank canvas, and it all kind of sums naturally. The phase is coherent. Things kind of glue together nicely. So I was really keen to say, look, let's make something that sets a new standard for a clean preamp. However, and Elliott too, I would imagine feels. I love characterful preamps. I love tube preamps. I love transformer preamps. I love all transformer gear, but tastefully, and it needs to be done, and it needs to be tailored, and you have to really understand the preamp and the recording and the capture to use them efficaciously, because you can easily overdo it. So that's where Camden with the Mojo came from. You have this beautifully clean preamp and an analog saturation circuit that you can mix to taste, variable, but probably most crucially, bypass it. So when you need that beautifully clean, transparent canvas, you have that.
So this is the preamp, right? Mm-hmm. And was it the 500 series one, or did you think that as a preamp designer, topology separate of what box you're putting it in?
Well, actually, Elliott, you should probably take this one because he always said when we first got together, Elliott goes, "Are we going to make anything besides preamps?"
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, the module was the first kind of incarnation of the preamp because it makes a lot of sense for a startup company. It's a module. There's a standard out there. People in the 500 series universe are very into picking up the new, exciting next thing. So we knew that we could kind of get into that market a little bit. But also, from a manufacturing point of view, it's a little bit easier. It's a card, it slots into somebody else's rack.
Yeah,
and it makes
no power supply.
We've got another video where we're going through the products in depth.
But in terms of manufacturing something and coming up with the ideas, this is a really nice format to get into. But we always had an idea, and we always knew that it would find its way into other forms, like you see here, the EC2, which is like a rack mount version, and then the EC1 above that, which is like a desktop version of that.
You said it's clean, but was there something in mind, or was Ed's design like just something that came out of the blue for him?
Sure. Well, there's different versions of clean. When we said clean, we were thinking of clean, but what Ed actually presented us was next level clean. I mean, there's not any preamp that actually measures as clean as this.
You said about the bandwidth of it as well.
This is it, yeah. Right. Bandwidth, the phase shift, the THD. Basically, we thought he'd do a good job, but he completely blew us away, really.
I didn't realise how good he could do it for the price.
Nice one, Ed.
Yeah. And when he measured it, he showed us the specs and things like that, and these numbers are unlike any other numbers we've ever seen before. So yeah, he built us a very clean preamp, and it kind of surprised us a little bit.
Yeah, and clean. And when we mean clean, I mean just think neutral canvas, and that's a lot of things. So when people think clean, they think not distortion. Okay, no distortion is one thing, which is harmonic distortion, things that shouldn't be there, right? But actually, the big one that I find that really colors recordings is frequency roll off on the high end and the low end, which results in phase shift in the audio bend as well. So basically, I find this a lot, right? So if I was using lots of different transformer preamps, right, and like let's say I was doing a drum kit, right, it could chaotically come together such that things went really nice and just beautiful, magic, lovely, right? But it could also go the other way, because if you think about a transformer preamp, right, transformers have anywhere between 20 degrees to 90 degrees of phase shift at 50 hertz, at 60 hertz. So the thing is, imagine if you're doing a drum kit, right? So that kick drum, 50 hertz, that's arriving, if there's 90 degrees of phase shift, what's that?
5 milliseconds.
It's like 5 milliseconds later. The low end is arriving 5 milliseconds later than the mids are. So you're getting the beater of the kick first, then you're getting the thump. Now that can work, and that's why things sound rounder, bigger, fatter when they work. But when they don't work, and then especially if you have like many channels of this stuff, sometimes there's like some phase interactions that don't play nicely together. And typically what engineers do, especially self-taught engineers do, they reach right for the processing, right? Oh, it's not quite fitting. I need to add more EQ, more compression, more this, more that. When actually, my recording ethos, and this is how I was taught, get it right at the source. Get a really good clean capture. You should be able to just put up the faders and it should sound great. And that's kind of what Camden gives you, is it's that perfectly neutral palette, no phase shift within the audio band. I say no, 2 degrees, but at 20 hertz, which is unheard of. And because of the bandwidth, the 1 hertz to 100K, there's no roll off within the audio band at all. So you just get this very present, very immediate sound. And it's just, that's the sound of clean. Now, a lot of people now love color and love character. Totally get it. I feel the same about a lot of equipment. And that's why Mojo's good, because Mojo gives you the stuff you want, but without the downsides. So you had that beautiful clean front end, that immediate phase response, that really neutral front end. So your mic is just doing its thing, and that's all it does. And then Mojo suited to taste, but crucially without the downside. So even if you whack up Mojo all the way, you're not going to get as much phase shift on the low end like you would with a transformer preamp. So it'll still sum better. You'll have less phase anomalies that you have to deal with in the mix phase. So it's a different approach, I think. And especially a lot of days now, people are going for colorful preamps, whereas we went a different way. We went clean with the ability to have some character.
Yeah, it's oddly unique. It's when I stumbled across you guys on the internet looking to expand my recording setup. You've created something really unique there. And if you want to hear it, we've done. Taylor and I did some recordings recently. We took it up to the studio, and there's one example where we just did mono recordings on everything, and it really did. We were so surprised with one microphone that was a low-end microphone at how. I think the proof is in the pudding. So go check that video out. And when you said about the choice of having it or not, it seems like that's guided everything with the whole product. Because these boxes, the switching, having the color, have all the options for the pro and home recordist. When did you come up with the idea for the rack system?
Sure. Well, obviously we made modules, and you have to put them in a rack of some sort.
But there's loads of people that do racks. I've got a few different brands, and they're all pretty much the same. Some talk about the power supply. I can remember, I'm going to buy with 500 series. It's always about the power supply.
It's important,
But then you went and put all this other stuff in there. So tell everyone about that.
Well, this thing's probably more was my domain because I was a home project studio guy, and I like the look of 500 series, but I could never really afford to get into it. And also, when you look at buying a rack with a high quality PSU, that costs a lot of money. And then you need an interface with enough I/O. You need D-sub, you need this, you need that. And before you know it, you've got a quite hefty bill, and without any modules to speak of. So for me, that was always a high barrier of entry. So I never really got into it. But part of our ethos was to get the 500 series format, which we think is really, really cool. To build your own interface style thing, a bit like guitar pedals.
Sorry, can you explain the 500 series? We keep saying this word. If you don't know what that is, what is 500
absolutely,
series?
Well, 500 series is a format that was developed a long time ago. API developed it, didn't they?
In the 70s,
for their big mixing console. So you have a massive mixing console, and then they made loads of little modules like this, which is a specific size, specific specification, that they put into their racks and put into their mixing console to basically build the channel strips. It's a good way to service them because you have things that can come in and out, good way to swap things around to configure things. And they were always exclusively used in the mixing consoles for a long period of time. But of course, as studios got smaller and home studio recording got more popular, people wanted to take these nice modules that were in these consoles for so many years, and they wanted to take them out on the road. They wanted to put them into smaller chassis. They wanted to use them in different ways. So API developed the lunchbox, which is what people call it, which, you're right, is a metal box that accepts 500 series cards, and so people can put API modules in there. But then people got onto this and jumped on the bandwagon. So you have modules from different manufacturers all around the world. Obviously, we make them here. You have things like Grace Design, Millennia, you've got Warm Audio as well, and hundreds and hundreds of different brands that make modules like this. They all have the same connector, the same size, and they all fit into any rack. So basically, it's a bit like guitar pedals.
Or Eurorack.
Or Eurorack. You have infinite choice, pretty much, and there's new ones coming out all the time. You buy the ones that you like the sound of, you like the thought of, and you build your own rack up, and you build it from scratch. And you know that any module will fit into any rack.
Is this a way to just make more money off people? or is this like, I can hear the skeptics out there, you know, like, hang on, I think in the guitar world, people are over it and they realise they get that choice. I know it's a bit of a rhetorical question that I asked there. But what are the benefits? Like you said, the serviceability, the building. Are there any drawbacks to 500 series?
Well, it does depend largely on the modules. I mean, if you talk to many people, they'll look at a module like this, and then they'll look at the rack mount equivalent, and they'll say, well, how can a little module like this perform in the same way as the rack mount version?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons why people might think that, especially when 500 series was first developed. The modules didn't use a lot of power, a lot of current, for example, and the rack mount versions had more current to use. But to be honest with you, different manufacturers approach it different ways. I mean, for example, we've designed our preamp to work in the 500 series format. So by building a circuit that works in that format and optimizing it to excel in that format, we can be confident that what you're getting here is the real deal. It's not a nice preamp that's just been put into a 500 series module.
Like, and then the other thing was when I got my first one, I've got one in my desk. It was getting in and out of it.
Yeah.
Getting in and out of it seemed to be
It's
like,
hard, yeah.
oh, I didn't think about that bit.
It's complicated, yeah.
I mean, I can't even begin to catalog all the reasons why it's difficult for a normal 500 series rack that's only in and out and a power supply with like a modern recording setup. Because I'll give you an example. Your typical audio interface, they clip early. Their clip points are like 16, 19 dBu. A lot of 500 series modules don't start sounding tasty until 21, 22 dBu. So you're not even getting the level that it's designed for.
And is that with the conversion you're talking about?
Yeah, basically, so like you had your typical, you know, be it a really high-end audio interface or an entry-level interface, you had this thing of analog versus digital levels, right? So typically, you know, your 0 dBFS point. So clipping in digital is bad. So you cannot exceed 0 dBFS. Whereas clipping in analog is kind of cool. Kind of sounds good. So the problem you have is you have to reference, when you're converting analog to digital, you have to say, okay, I have an analog level. What am I going to set my digital level to and then convert it to, right? So there's a standard for this, which is 18 dBu is 0 dBFS. It's a AES standard. But interfaces, crucially, they have inputs that only accept certain levels. Like, you know, even your high-end interfaces, 19 dBu clip point, 20 dBu clip point, a lot of these modules clip at 26, 24 dBu. So you can't, if you were to, you know, run a module at full whack to get the vibe that you think that sounds good, well, now it's going in your interface and it just sounds terrible because it's digital clipping, you know? And
how have you solved that?
Well, so our internal reference levels for the digital conversion is 24 dBu. So we have like 6 dB more headroom than your typical audio interface. And that allows you to use your modules really hot, where they typically perform the best. And in fact, that's one thing about the R8 that people, like when people just connect the monitor outputs, they're like, oh my God, this thing's loud. Because it's like an analog console. Analog gear, like in the studios from the 70s, 80s, this stuff is loud. It's just got current for days and it sounds great. That is very different from the very precise digital realm that like people our age are kind of used to now. Because that's, you know, everything's kind of more contained. You know, it's not, you don't have like, back in the day, if you look at these big studio consoles, they have 36 dBu outs, 30 dBu outs. I mean, they're just outrageously too hot. But the whole studio was created around that, you know? So you drive the tape hard, you drive this compressor hard, and it all sounds great, and it's all harmonic distortion, and hey ho, don't you know, it makes magical records. Nowadays, like this was like the 80s, you got into the digital format, and digital is different. Digital is about precision. You can't clip. Got to level match carefully. Clocks need to match. It's all about precision. Whereas analog, old school recording is about vibe. Yeah, just throw a level at it. You know, that'll sound good. You know, that is not how digital recording is done. So this marries that two worlds. So the digital has the digital precision. It has all the refinement of a high-end digital interface, but it has the raw level and current of a nice, juicy analog console. And it's designed, because it's all in one box, to work nicely together. So it takes away all the complexity from the users. You know, because like a lot of people, analog versus digital reference levels, that's a weird thing for a lot of people. That's not obvious, you know, and kind of difficult. And then you have to buy inline pads, and it's just all complicated. You know, whereas this is just plug in 2 cables and you're off.
I love it. This one, what's the product you're most proud of? Is there one?
Ooh.
That's a good question.
That's a really good question. You first, Els. I'll answer.
I think what I'm most proud of, I mean, it's a little bit of a cop-out, I suppose, is the fact that every R8 or every A that exists out there is completely different from one another.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Because obviously we make a rack, and when you buy it, there's nothing in it. And then yourself, you could buy it and you put whatever modules you like in there and you build it to your own taste. So when we see pictures online of people with their racks, they've got completely different assortment of modules in each one, and they're basically building their own audio interface. And that's what gets us excited, because they're getting excited because they feel like they're really getting their hands back onto the recording process, onto the mixing process, and building something that works for them. That's why no two racks are the same, really. I think that's what excites me.
We're
most.
enabling creativity, and that's what music's all about. I love the fact that we allow people to make their tone, their sound, what is in their head, what they wanted to do. We can help them make it a reality, rather than imposing on them what we think sounds best. Although I guess we can kind of do it a little bit with Camden. The R8 and the ADAT, the spirit is try it, do whatever you want. It can facilitate pretty much any setup you want. I would say probably the product I'm most proud of. I mean, I love the R8 and the ADAT so much; they're both brilliant. But I love the N22H. Oddly, this little guy up here.
Yeah, just a quick one, because not only this all looks traditional. It maybe doesn't look traditional to you, but multi-room recording is always, we spoke about in the other video, Elliott, how hard that is. Yeah, so what does this do? Yeah,
so basically, I love this box because it's a problem solver, and it's just totally throwing out the rules and rethinking it. And that's what I love doing, and I think Elliott and the team do too.
Sorry, even in the same room.
Yeah.
Like from our recording desk is there. Yeah. If I want to sit here and record, this box solves a lot of those issues.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So the N22H, it was the thing that came before this box was our cast system. So cast in and of itself was quite a cool, rethinking of things. Right, why is cable distribution so difficult? Like, why? It's just like, whenever you record someone, you need to give them a monitor mix. Like, that's obvious. They can't record without a monitor mix. Why is it that nobody's thought this out before? And basically, it was just. I'm really proud of this because it's throwing out all the rule book and completely rethinking it from the ground up. Even something as trivial as cabling, we don't even take that for granted, and I'm quite proud of that. And we just designed something that solves a problem for you. If you're recording, Jack, I know you can appreciate this with all the videos. When you need to get I/O over there, but your system's over there, you also need to send a monitor mix over there. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah, a nice one. It's showing what cable we're talking about.
Yeah.
You might see this as the thing that plugs into your modem at home. And you made a great point that think about how high quality it's got to be to deal with all that data, to materialize your Netflix in front of you. Yep. So like for audio, turns out baked in is the ability to do real high quality analog audio as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, like we had this with ADAT. So, for instance, it's confusing how we're talking about the 500 ADAT. Some people might see Toslink, some people might see optical, some people might see ADAT. What is that, right? Toslink is the connector, optical is the transport, ADAT is the protocol, right? So take this cable here. RJ45 is the connector. Cat5 is the transport, it's the standard of the cabling. And then Ethernet is the protocol that it transmits. So we don't transmit protocol over this cable. We are using the physical copper wires inside of it and the shielding to send good old-fashioned electrons, balanced analog audio. Because the cable standard, to your point, Jack, is really high quality. And because there's so much data these days, so many routers, computers, modems, you name it, these things get produced in quantities that are just ridiculous. And whenever you have quantities that are huge, you get better pricing. Whereas XLR cables, as much as we like to think that everyone uses XLR cables, and oh my God, I have loads of XLR cables. There are not many people like us, Jack. We are a fraction of the world.
We forgot the pain of buying all of them back when we were younger.
Yeah. Whereas think about the people in your life. How many people have an Ethernet cable in their home? How many people have an XLR cable in their home?
It's like, I always think of my dad when I come. My dad records himself at home.
Exactly.
And weirdly, I find this is simpler for him to get his head around.
Absolutely.
Like instead of going, you got to buy 4 XLR, because that's what it's doing, right? It's sending 2 that way. You have 4 channels of audio,
that's right? Yeah, that's it.
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, like, if this wasn't Ethernet cable, if you made XLR cables, like if you had a cable that was 4 XLRs on this end, but the cable was exactly the same, it would cost 10 times as much, even though it's the same physical cable, because it's not produced in the same volumes.
Yeah.
They're not, and it's
custom.
Yeah, exactly. So by using box standard cable and then doing a clever system to repurpose what that cable can do, you get something that's quite special.
And then also outdoors, because the power is in the unit. That's the other big problem is you go, I need to get the audio there, but then I've got a box there, now I need to power that box. And this runs off batteries, right?
It can run off a 9-volt power supply, so it comes with a power supply, or it can run off a pedal power supply as well, for all those guitarists out there.
Oh, cool.
Keep this
they
on
do
your
that
board.
pedal train nano, don't
Exactly.
they? Yeah.
So, or a one spot, whatever you have, just it'll plug in with the rest of your pedals. Or, of course, you have the 9-volt battery. So the 9-volt battery, if it's we have these 2 different power modes, and basically the 2 different power modes are to get the most of when you have a 9-volt battery. So you can get up to 10 hours battery life out of the 9-volt battery just by switching that over to the left. And yeah, I mean, as soon as if you've ever done location recording, or even not location recording, even like if you're playing live and you just need something somewhere.
Yeah, you're doing YouTube videos, it's sunny outside, and you want to just get a different set. You can run this out your window with your cable.
Yeah, it's a stage box as well, of course, with the inputs on there. Yeah.
And also, another big thing, on some lower cost interfaces, like the Focusrite range, for example, people then go, I'll buy some posh headphones. But then the headphone amp, maybe that's where it was lower cost. And I've learnt that I have that with my friends. They go, oh, my headphones aren't very loud. Yeah. This is a crazy headphone amp as well, right?
Yes, be careful, because with certain headphones it might be too loud. So be careful, because it's designed. Headphones! I could talk about headphones for days. Headphones are actually one of the more criminally underappreciated aspects in audio. So, for instance, what's the difference between a 600 ohm headphone and a 32 ohm headphone? Very few people understand what that is, right? So, I think when you're entry level, you think, a higher impedance, they're a lot lower. Like, I have to crank it a lot more. They're not loud. Why would anybody want a 600 ohm headphone? It's kind of complicated, but basically, impedance varies over the frequency range of the headphone drivers. The impedance is not linear of any headphone driver. It varies a lot because it's core material. It's very complicated, pardon me. It's very complicated, right? So it's all over the place. Now, the key of why you want a really high impedance headphone is because the higher impedances, when it deviates, it's not as dramatic. When you have a 600 ohm headphone and the deviation is between 550 ohms and 650 ohms, not a big deal, or not that big of a deal. Whereas if you have a 32 ohm headphone, and if the lowest value is 10 ohm, the highest value is 50 ohm, that's a huge deal. That's going to color the sound. That's going to make resonances, nonlinear frequency response, nonlinear THD.
Did not know that.
A lot of people don't know that. It's just not a thing that's like on people's radar.
It was always just volume to me.
It's complicated. It's complicated. And so basically, the thing is, entry-level audio interfaces, especially ones that are bus powered, they simply don't have enough voltage to drive high impedance headphones. Alternatively, they don't. A lot of these sorts of interfaces don't have a low enough output impedance to ensure that they can drive a low impedance headphone linearly. So the problem is, I'm getting complicated, sorry, Jack.
I love it.
But basically, if you have a 32 ohm headphone, you want the output impedance of your headphone amp to be at least 1/10 the impedance. So if you have a 32 ohm headphone, you want a headphone output that's 3.2 ohms or less. So your typical audio interface, I think they're 10 ohms usually?
Can be, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're using 32 ohm headphones, I promise you that headphone amp is coloring the headphones. Guaranteed. It's not driving a low enough impedance to not color the tone.
Because that's one of the upgrades a lot of people do. They go, I want to get a bit of sound at home, and they go buy expensive headphones.
Yeah, which is a good idea, as long as you get a headphone amp with it.
But if they have an ADAT out on their interface, and they maybe wanted to pimp it out and get something like this, that I know it seems like a long way round to get it. Like, why wouldn't you buy a higher quality interface?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of higher quality interfaces don't have very good headphones.
That's always the thing that they kind of fall down on.
You could say the same thing about preamps. Like, you can spend £1,000 on a USB audio interface. You likely won't have appreciably better preamps than a £100 interface. Right. Which is crazy to think about. That's crazy to think about.
We're going to have to do a video on that, Tay, because recently we tried the Austrian Audio headphones. And
they're great.
They were like, God, these feel amazing. Just the feeling of them was amazing. And I think we should do that with the Apollo. and we should hear that. We'll do a headphone shootout.
It makes a huge difference, and where it makes a huge difference is super low impedance headphones and really high impedance headphones. So I talked about the problem with low impedance headphones, which is basically, the output impedance is too high and it colors the sound. The opposite is true with the high impedance headphones. It doesn't have enough voltage to drive those headphones properly. Because Ohm's law, we're getting into complicated electronics theory. I feel like I'm Ed Holmes here. But basically, the higher the impedance, your headphones, the more voltage you need to drive them. Now, if you're using a bus power interface, USB interface, that's only 5 volts. Meaning 5 volts to do all the audio, all the digital, the headphone amp, everything in that box. It's just simply not enough to really get enough headroom and enough voltage swing to be able to do this kind of stuff. Whereas we have a big beefy power supply here, and in this little guy, even though it's only a 9 volt, we step it up internally to 16 volt to get this voltage swing. Now I'm going to link it back to what Elliott was talking earlier and what you asked about earlier, Jack, with 500 series. 500 series, part of the standard is 16 volt rails, right? 16 volt power, which is a lot. Well, compared to your typical audio interface. Your typical audio interface has 5 volt rails internally. Now, the voltage determines how much dynamic range you have. Because what you have is voltage swing. That's what makes a sine wave, right? So it goes high, it goes low. Plus 5 volts, negative 5 volts, you get a sine wave, right? Well, we have plus 16, minus 16. That's the API 500 series standard. So you get a lot more dynamic range, a lot more. But to Elliott's point before, some manufacturers, especially in the early days, Jack, what you're saying, their gear was 24 volts or 28 volts or 32 volts, and now they tweaked the design to make it 16 volts. So that's when people are like, oh,
it doesn't sound. They probably I bought that preamp in the 500 series. It doesn't quite seem as.
And that's why that happens.
We get that a lot. Yeah.
That's why that happens. Like if a company has a design that's designed for 24 volts, and they've just done a quick bodge, do a step down transformer or something like that, and just make it 16 volts, it's not going to sound the same. It's not designed to work at that voltage. Whereas obviously we design everything around 16 volts. So that's why it sounds, and then the same thing with the headphone amps. We design the headphone amp with these headphones in mind. Whereas I think on interfaces, or so it seems, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, just plonk a headphone output on there. Good enough. It's not good enough. That's one of our big things. It's one of our sayings at Cranborne.
Just so you can hear the click.
Yeah.
It's like,
one of our mantras at Cranborne is good enough is simply not good enough. It has to be great. There's no point. Like, why do something half measures?
I think I saw you guys about 4 months ago for the first time. I think you've made a collection of products that could actually start like a 500 series revolution. I can't see why. And if you haven't got it by now, just go look at more. Is there anywhere else to look into your products? Where can you do a cool thing on Instagram? You even give away gold, and tell the guys about this, because I think this is so fun.
Well, yes. Well, obviously when we make racks, some of those racks are pre-installed with Gold Camdens. We don't know which ones. We don't know where they're going. And a lucky winner will open up their rack box. They'll get a golden ticket, and they're the lucky custodian of a Gold Camden. There's only about 10, 15 of those in existence. And
you can see, I've seen a few pop up on Instagram. The guys, go check the guys out. What's your Instagram? Cranborne Audio.
Cranborne Audio, yeah, absolutely.
Cranborne Audio, and look into 500 series. And I talk a lot about in the synth. I've been doing. I did a video recently on the Behringer Deep Mind. You were saying, because you're into your synths as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's kind of an end game synth. It's with the amount of effects it's got, the amount of voices it's got, 12 voices.
Yeah, 12 voices, crazy.
And the more and more I do these product videos, I'm starting to learn that most people, if you're passionate, which we are about music, we're all into music, that's why you're probably watching this video, that we're probably going to go through the same journey, or we want to try certain things out. And what I think is amazing, especially with this interface one, what's the R8 you call it, right?
Yep, 508, yep.
Yeah, this is an audio interface, but it's, like you said, you're enabling people to choose their own path and choose at which level they want to start at, where they want to finish. And this, absolutely. If you're the type of person who you're very serious about it, you might as well start with this. Or look at this, instead of buying a new interface, do you have that connectivity to get into one of these boxes, and then like a pedal board, you can refine that to the day you die.
Indeed. And expand it if you want. You can start with an
Yeah,
R8.
you change genre. Like
Yep.
you're there, you've got all these kind of things that you know all the metal guys are into.
Oh, yeah.
Or like you work as me. I'm at the moment a mainly knob twiddler for a mixer. But my dreams are one day to be the mixer, and then I can change my modules that aren't maybe so tracking based to be more mix intensive. And check out that other video. Elliott explains it so well. There are magic little things in here that do not exist in any other product. And that's why I'm so excited that Andertons stock them. And I wanted you guys to see it, because we've got other videos where we're doing the mic shootouts. We're going to be using, we've used the EC2, and we're going to continue to use it, because it's, and the incremental gain.
Switch gain, yeah, whatever you want to call it, exactly. You know exactly what gain value you're doing. You can have any two Camdens in the world. You could have a Camden that was made in 2018. You can have a Camden that was made yesterday. They'll be exactly the same. Identical. Stereo matched pairs. Any two Camdens, anywhere.
I'm so excited to see these take off. I'm sure, hopefully, I've got a feeling that people will come back to this video in years to come to see the inception of it. Not to see my timer go off like a bloody loser. But thank you so much, guys, for being here. That's all we can do.
Awesome, man.
We'll explode on it. If you like what we're doing, consider subscribing. If you don't, let us know. We all learn from what you have to say. And Taylor, thank you as ever.
Thanks, Taylor.
You handsome fellow. One day, we'll check out those videos. You're going to see Taylor playing drums. He can play everything. And he's a legend. See you guys.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.